You're listening to the Outdoors Group podcast. This podcast is a call to arms to get children and young people outside again. It's your one-stop shop for all things outdoor, child, young person and education related. Thanks for tuning in. In today's episode, I'm at our South Brent site, and we were going to sit outside, but it's quite miserable and mizzly, to use a Devon word. And I'm here with Matt McMann. Matt's our Behaviour Lead at the Outdoors School. He's joined me to talk about why regulation needs to be at the centre of an educational approach. So thanks for joining me today, Matt.
You're welcome. Thanks for being here.
Oh, no, you're so welcome. So I'd like to start just by hearing a bit about you to kind of contextualise the podcast. Can you tell me a bit about your background and your role within the school?
Yeah, absolutely. I was in a strange situation. I didn't really know what I wanted to do when I grew up until I was 43, which is I always find a strange one. I originally trained to be a PE teacher at Marjohn's in Plymouth, but changed my course mid-term. I realised that at the time teaching really wasn't for me. I ended up running my own business and then kind of fell into education when I came back down to Devon. In an alternative primary provision for non-mainstream pupils who'd largely been excluded. And I still remember it on my first day. There was a little young learner, 7 or 8 years old, knee-high to a grasshopper. And my first morning I walked in and went, "Hi, I'm Matt, I'm going to be working with you today." And he said, told me to go forth and multiply and called me a name. and I looked at him and went, "Well, there's nothing wrong with his eyesight, and he's a pretty good judge of character." So I knew it was going to be pretty, and I stood there and went, "This is going to be fun."
Yeah.
And yeah, at the end of my first week, I remember going home, having a glass of wine with my other half and sitting there and thinking, I've made a difference to some really difficult lives today, and that's something I'd never had before as in my working career, like running my own business or anything. So, it's something that I'd keep remembering that first Friday evening and what I felt then, and I still try and make myself remember, actually, this is really important what we do, and it is. Yeah. So then went to a mainstream school and worked in the behaviour team there, which, was I'd like to say it was an interesting compare and contrast, but actually a lot of the issues were very similar. Mainstream and alternative provisions. And then had a bit of a health scare and decided a little change of tack was needed and ended up at the Outdoors School. First as a tutor in bats.
On the South Brent site here.
At the South Brent site here, so I'm a Bats OG, which Mason and Kayla, two of our learners, are always very keen to tell me. And then was the transitions tutor, so helped our Year 9 learners transition into what was our Phase 3, which is a slightly different approach to our provision. And now I'm the Behaviour Lead as part of the MLT team at the school, and something that I've been doing that for a few months now. And really getting into it and doing all sorts of interesting things like approach to policy and all that kind of thing.
Yeah, I was just about to say, so in your role as Behaviour Lead, how much of it is kind of at a computer doing policies and talking to staff, and are you still in the woods sometimes as well?
Yeah, absolutely in the woods. I made because we didn't really know exactly what the role was, I've made a conscious effort to try and be down on site, whichever site I'm on, as often as possible. Yeah. I think it's, I wear the red hoodie for a reason, so I'm easy to see, right? If anybody needs any support or there's any learners want to say hello, and South Brent, this is my site, so I know most of the learners pretty well. They all want to come and say hello to me as well. Yeah. But I think that level of support actually on the ground is quite important for the middle leadership team. To demonstrate, and I think it gives me a good opportunity as well to hopefully demonstrate some best practice. Maybe pick up on a few issues that staff might not share necessarily, but you can see what's going on a little bit and really gives you a good feel. And in the middle leadership team, we ultimately we're here to support the delivery, but also to inform SLT for their decisions. Yeah. So actually being on the ground for me is really important, that you can get an overview of what's going on and really feed into SLT the information that they need when they're thinking strategically and stuff. But because it's a new role as well, I'm fortunate enough, Adam, my line manager, who's inclusion lead, in SLT has given me a little bit of scope to have a look at policy as well. So there's been an element of that. There is a little bit of back office stuff. I'm starting to get into the data a little bit more as well now, which is where, as someone described, we're very data rich but not really sure what to do with it. So it's one of those things where I'm really looking at what we do in terms and actual data is useful for delivery staff, what's useful for SLT. And we're just starting to get a kind of handle on that now, and it's hopefully feeding into our head of school report as well. So the head of school, Dan as it is coming in, he's going to have hopefully be really informed about what's going on the ground, without him having to necessarily trawl around all the sites. So it's a bit of a mix. It's mostly in office, if I'm honest, but I do make a conscious effort to make sure I'm also...
So nip down slightly.
Absolutely. Still put the old boots on.
Excellent. Well, thanks. That's super helpful just to kind of contextualise your experience for what we're going to talk about. So so we're talking about we're talking about regulation. Emotional regulation is obviously part of that. But for those who are listening that might not know, can you explain what we mean when we talk about regulation?
Okay, so when we talk about regulation, we tend to mean self-regulation, which is the ability to manage thoughts, emotions and behaviour to help achieve goals. Now, it starts with co-regulation, when you're as a very young child, that you will regulate with usually the primary caregiver, mum, dad, whoever that may be, and they're learning that from the parent. Now, a large number of our learners have additional complex needs, which have meant, for whatever reason, that necessarily hasn't happened quite as effectively as it could have done. So, for the large part in a specialist educational setting, it's a learner being able to manage big emotions effectively and to be able to become calm, focused and ready to learn. So we find that a lot of our learners can have chaotic lives outside of home and find it very difficult to manage those big emotions and perhaps haven't had the co-regulation. So it's a really important part of our job to try and help the learners through that, how to manage their own feelings and their own emotions. And when they're nice and calm, hopefully they'll be ready to do all the wonderful stuff that we do at the outdoor school.
Yeah, absolutely. I've just mentioned emotional regulation when I said it, but I was also doing a little bit of research and reading about nervous system regulation. Are they the same thing? Are there kind of different types of regulation?
They're not, but they absolutely feed into each other.
Okay,
the Venn diagram has got a massive crossover bit of those two things. So a constant high emotional state can lead to constant nervous system dysregulation. So we tend to find that some of our learners, again, given their chaotic home lives, are in a constant state of fight and flight. Now, this means that they can take a lot of the way that they process information, sensory information that they're receiving is quite different. So that co-regulation that we may do with them and teaching them that self-regulation will help to alleviate the symptoms of that, their nervous system dysregulation, which is kind of, more often than not, is caused by that emotional dysregulation.
So, for example, you're saying that they process sensory kind of input differently because they're in this fight and flight kind of state. Is that in the sense that something that you and me might think is innocuous, they would perceive as a threat? Absolutely,
absolutely. It's a way that their body is responding in a high arousal state. So when they're in a really high arousal state, when there is no trigger for them to be, then the body processes things quite differently. You're really going back to the old lizard brain where there's no higher thinking involved. It is simply flight, fight, freeze, fall, and all that kind of stuff. So it means that as they're already in a state of high arousal, almost everything they see will be a threat. Now, threat's quite a strong word there, but it might be a threat not just physically to them, but emotionally to their self-esteem, whatever that may be, they will consider it that. So it might be, you could ask a learner to ask a really simple, would you like something for breakfast? Well, it might be that, why are you making the demand of me that I've got to eat breakfast? That's not what I'm ready for at the moment. So it can be a quite innocuous social interaction, and because these learners are in such a high arousal state, that they find that as really difficult to deal with, and it's something that we deal with on a daily basis.
And how do you kind of support them with that kind of nervous system regulation then?
It's really tough. It's not. It's one of those where you'd love them to be able to go, actually, I've explained it once, there's a little switch on your back and it's just everything's fine, right? But actually that nervous system dysregulation comes from a factor of things that, as a school, we have them for 6 hours, right? That we don't have any control over. So again, it's learning how to manage that. And it's a very slow process of being there with the learner, demonstrating and modelling best practice and how to react to when you're feeling cross. Perhaps even narrating how they're feeling for them, because sometimes our learners are in the constant state of high arousal. That's their normal, right? So this is just how I am. And actually, explaining and narrating to the to the learner, like, your face is really flushed and you're holding your fists really hard. When I'm feeling cross, I do that. So you're explaining the triggers that you can, the signs that you can see that they're slightly dysregulated, and they may go, oh yeah, that's what I'm doing, but that's just what I do. And then narrating it as, I do that when I'm feeling really scared or cross. They'll go, oh well, maybe that's how I'm feeling as well. So you kind of letting them know that you understand where they are, and actually narrating it for them is really clear for them that actually maybe this isn't how I should be all the time necessarily. Okay, and that actually is the first stage of, right, okay, how do we manage this, right? So then it's like, well, I'm feeling cross, I tend to go for a walk, or I'll hit a punch bag, or whatever it might be that you may demonstrate to them, and that will give us then some strategies that work for that particular learner. Hitting a punch bag may not always be ideal, but whatever is useful for that learner to help them express how they're feeling and maybe get a little bit of that energy out, whatever that may be, or even get their energy up. It might be that they're quite low and in a freeze mode. So the delivery staff that we've got are brilliant and tend to know the learners very well, and over a period of time we'll establish that group of strategies that will help that learner to identify when they're in that high arousal state and how they can cope with that and how they manage that. And that regulation of getting out of that high arousal state we do very well with our grounding that all our learners will do when they come into school.
And I imagine it must be quite a long-term process. We did a case study with a parent whose children are alternative provision, and she was talking about the school trauma that her son had kind of gone through, and how she said that it took, she said, like, years. She said she thinks it wasn't until he was 8 or 9 that he'd stopped living in a permanent state of flight or fight. So it must be quite a long-term process. Absolutely,
it can be a process of years, and interestingly, we have little peaks and troughs as well. It's like when learners come back from a holiday, for example, we know that their grounding may take longer. It may, that not only is it a long period of time for learners to grow into a new normal for them. I mean, it's the nervous dysregulation is a response to an extreme event. Normally, we could say trauma, whatever it might be, and actually, it is a work of years. And actually, it's a conversation I tend to have with our staff quite a lot. Is that they get a little bit disheartened, like, I'm not seeing any improvement, and you're not seeing it. And I say, well, because I kind of dib in and out a little bit, I can go, well, 3 months ago that would have been extraordinary for that learner, and it could be something like literally just sitting there eating some cereal. That could be extraordinary for that learner.
And when you're in it, sometimes it's hard to see the tiny changes.
It's like watching hair grow, right? You can't see it, but all of a sudden someone's got a ponytail, right? And you've gone, where did that come from, right? And I can see, having not necessarily seeing them every day, you get a little bit more of a snapshot of it. It is actually easy to identify those developments. And it's important for our staff to know that as well. It's like something I really do is try and remind the staff, like, you're doing great work. This doesn't, you probably don't feel it every day. But the mere thing, the tiny little incremental things that you do with that learner every single day makes such a difference to their lives. And even though you might not see it now, they will remember it. And so later on in life they'll go, oh, I remember when Matt said this, or I remember when Kim said that, or whatever it might be. It's like, oh yeah, I remember that happening, and then, oh, how did I manage that problem? They will remember it. And it's like it does feel like kicking water uphill sometimes, because it's like you're really swimming against the tide. Couple of analogies put in there: swimming and kicking water.
I like that.
But actually, we are really helping these learners every day to manage that regulation.
And you were saying that the nervous system and the emotional regulation kind of tie into each other. So
absolutely.
The emotional regulation is more about being able to regulate not just your whole nervous system, but like particular emotions, presumably.
Absolutely.
Okay,
we call them the big emotions. When our learners, when they get cross, tend to get very, very cross, and it's really noticeable. It's managing those big emotions to make sure that you are in a position to then interact or do whatever bit of learning that we've got, but basically to cope, right?
Yeah.
We need to make sure that our learners are in a position that they can cope. So our grounding process is really, really important that we get right, and make it that it's actually. It looks like they just come in and kick a football around for some of them, but actually there's a real reason for most of them. It's Hannah Gill explains it particularly well, who's one of our assistant Senkos. She's the grounding expert. And there are 3 stages. So it's getting the heart rate up. So we're actually making sure that our learners are physically able to move about and get a little bit of energy. And then there's also the strategic bit where we might get them then to play a card game, which is like, oh, okay, I need to think of something slightly differently. And then it might be something where we level them out and a little bit relaxing. It might be just sitting in a hammock, listening to a story or some music or something like that. But those 3 stages are really important in the grounding. And each of our learners gets something individual. So, for one learner, it may be kicking a rugby ball around is their heart. It may be that we go for a bit of a walk, or it could be something, whatever that is, whatever that looks like for our learners. then we're in such a fortunate position that we can tailor that to be absolutely bespoke for them and match their interests as well.
Yeah, amazing. And so I get that's really helpful, I think, for those listening to know what we're talking about when we say about regulation. But I guess the beef of it all, or the chunk of the whole thing that I want to know is, why should regulation be at the centre of education? Kind of why is it so important, and what do we mean when we say let's put regulation?
Yeah, I've actually written something down in some notes before we did this, and the first thing I put without regulation we cannot learn. Yeah, and I disagree with what I've written down. Actually,
okay.
Because actually part of learn in a traditional sense, but we can learn how to regulate, and that's one of the most important lessons that our learners will have actually. Funny enough, I was speaking to a parent who is similar vintage to me, early mid-50s. Went through mainstream school as I did, and found it really difficult to get her head around exactly what it is we do. It's like, well, where's your maths lessons? Or, where's your science lessons? And it's actually, that's not how we do this. And actually, their child was, the most important lesson they could learn is to regulate, right? And it was like, and again, as we've just said, this could be a work of 6 months. Yeah. It could be a work of 18 months. It could be a work of 5 years for their entire time here with us. And so when the learner comes home and goes, well, what have you done today? Have you had any lessons? No, not really. That's what the learner's expressed, right? But actually the learning for them to regulate has been massive. Yeah. And then we can traditionally move on to something a little bit more.
That looks more like what people think
it's going to look like. Now, I appreciate with our project-based learning, again, we look different again in our terms of our learning. But it's, even if something looks like learning, when a person's dysregulated, their higher functioning brain isn't even in charge, right? They're still in that flight mode. So actually, for something that will help them develop and learn the skills that they need for the next stage in their life, their regulation is absolutely critical, because without that, if you can imagine, if you're in flight or fight mode and everything's a threat, and I start trying to explain Pythagoras' theorem, you're going to just go, "Not what on earth are you talking about? It means nothing to me, and I'm not going to absorb that, because I'm not bothered about the square and a hypotenuse. I'm worried about what might happen if I say the wrong thing, or I'm worried about someone making a demand on me, or I've got school trauma. I'm a bit worried about being here. There's lots of things that can feed into that before we even get to any learning. So in order for our learners to build those skills, they need to be in the right kind of place to learn, and that is as regulated as they can be.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I often mention Maslow's theory in passing on the podcast, but I feel like it's really pertinent to this conversation. So I was going to ask you to tell me how it fits into what we're talking about, but actually I think maybe, if you don't mind, to put you on the spot, whether you could just give a brief explanation of what Maslow's theory is, so for people that
Maslow's, if we're talking hierarchy of needs.
Yes, that one.
Okay, so there are. I'm going to have to get. There's obviously a fabulous drawing of it. Yes. So there is. It's a triangle, if you can imagine, and on the base there is the things that we would need to survive. So that would be shelter, warmth, food and water, right? That's the ultimate basics of life. And then in the kind of layers above that are that feeling of belonging, the the attachment with others, friendship, all those kind of things that make us being a human being and make us feel regulated.
Yeah.
There are numerous layers to it. I would add Wi-Fi in there now as one of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Make sure decent Wi-Fi. It could even be on the bottom row. Yeah. So
and then at the top is self-actualization.
Self-actualization.
Which is quite a lofty term.
That's a really lofty term, isn't it? It's something that, you know, being the best version of you and being able to understand where you sit and where you are within.
I feel like functioning and thriving maybe should be at the top.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a much better way of describing it than I would have done. Yeah, absolutely. Functioning and thriving, and it doesn't always have to look the same, does it? For each individual, you know, I'm hopefully functioning and thriving in an environment that is completely different to some of my friends. It looks different, but ultimately it's built on that same foundation of making sure I am safe, warm, and cared for. Yeah. And as you were saying, how does it fit into what we do? Yeah. Actually, it's something I've been looking into at school. Is that making sure that our learners are warm and safe. I took a little bit of a straw poll in January when we had that lovely weather, which lasted about 4 months. Didn't it? And it felt like the Somme down on sites. I did a little straw poll of how well dressed and how well provided our learners were for the environment that we're in. And out of, I think, 17 on site at the time, I probably said 4 were reasonably, like they had boots, one coat, and others some were barefoot. You know, that's a really difficult line to tread with our SEN learners, because I appreciate there's some sensory issues sometimes.
But I guess for some SEN learners, they struggle to know what their temperature is, so they might get really cold without even realising it.
Exactly that. So it becomes sensory. And one learner in particular, we've now got him onto the bare feet shoes, which is an absolute godsend for him. It's a safety issue as well, among other things. And we had a lot of conversations with him and home. And while he may not feel the cold necessarily in the way you or I might, his body reacts the same, right?
Yes,
so all that is right. I'm really cold. My feet are purple.
Yes.
I'm going to fill you with cortisol and say this isn't okay, right? Yeah. So even if he perhaps didn't process it the same, his body is still reacting the same. Yeah. And actually, that makes it much more difficult to regulate, because Maslow's hierarchy, one of those bottom needs is not being met. Yeah. I'm not warm and safe. Yeah. Right. And even if it's self-inflicted in this particular instance. And self-inflicted is not necessarily means something that he's done deliberately. It still doesn't stop the body reacting in the way that it does, and actually makes his life a little bit more difficult without him realising it. So meeting the needs here is absolutely critical, and it's the first part of what we do during the day in the grounding bit as well. It's like actually the feeling safe, right? Okay, one of our safe, kind and curious, which is what we go by. It's feeling safe might be as much as, morning, Bob, how are you? Yeah. You well? Oh, yeah. Thanks, Matt, I'm really well. That could be the first meeting part of that hierarchy of needs, that feeling of safe, that feeling of belonging that we really try and instill. And it's really important that our learners feel that throughout the day. Yeah.
And do you do breakfast as well?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, meeting the needs. I mean, we do PRICE, which is protecting rights in a caring environment, which is our approach to. I hate the phrase behaviour management. We don't manage behaviour, we just respond to actions, right? Yeah. But it's we use PRICE, and part of the PRICE is that our primary strategies within that are exactly that, making sure they've got breakfast, because they may not have had breakfast. Checking in with them, going, are you okay? How are you feeling? Our learners are getting very good at being able to demonstrate, either verbally or otherwise. We do a lot of 5-point scale stuff. So, how are you feeling on your speedometer? Some groups use, which is, I'm feeling 5, so I'm really, really fizzy. Yeah. Okay, so that then may instruct the staff to go, okay, we're really fizzy. What do we need to do? Do we need to, as I say with the grounding, which stage needs to take precedent there? Is it we just really go for that and go, let's really use up some energy, or is it that we need to settle down? Again, staff knowing their learners know their learners best, so they will respond appropriately. Really meeting those needs is critical, because we know that some of our learners may not have all their needs met effectively outside of school. Yeah. So it's really important that they see that this is our normal, right? Of course you can have breakfast. No problem with. And obviously on the campfire we got some great sausages, bacon, and eggs. And I tend to tie in my trips around site. I'm not suggesting it's around meal times, but it's around meal times. So I can. Oh, is there a spare bacon sandwich for me? No. So yeah, we make sure that, and actually the act of cooking in itself can be such a community thing that we do as a group. And we do try and get the learners involved in that, and so that they are eventually able to meet their own needs, right? How do you cook a bacon sandwich? Now, you and I may find that really simple, but it's something that they may need later in life.
My son's autistic, and he's 14, and he's just started to learn to cook, and I think in the last month I've come home twice and he's left the oven on all day since he's made his lunch at lunchtime and forgotten to turn it off. And he said, I think I just can't cook anymore. And I was like, no, that's not the answer. So we're still working on how to help him to remember
I still leave the old age with me rather than
I did say to him, sometimes grown-ups do it too. But yeah, and it's like those, so actually I'm completely with you that actually you can't take it for granted that being able to make food is something that kids will know. They have to be taught it.
Yeah, absolutely. And for some of our learners, those life skills are critical.
Yeah.
And while I appreciate with the environment that we've got, we can't necessarily fulfil some of their life skills. Putting on a washing machine might not always be feasible. No. We're in a forest, right? That there are a number of things that they can learn that we can teach them around that and being able to self-support themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. And when we talk about this kind of his hierarchy of needs and being regulated to learn, we're not saying that they have to get to the self-actualization to learn, are we? We're saying that they need to be kind of moving on the pyramid.
I think in my life I've been at the top of the pyramid about twice. I think genuinely, it's having everything fall into place like that is such a rare event, isn't it? So yeah, absolutely, and we don't explicitly teach them Maslow's hierarchy to the learners, but they actually probably could identify where they were in it with a little bit of explanation. It's kind of one of the things we do with our check-ins is like, okay, where are we? How are we feeling? It might be, I didn't sleep very well last night. My brother was causing bother and whatever it might be. And you go, actually, so we're not feeling safe. So we know kind of where we are. So let's work on that a bit today. Yeah. Let's make sure you're feeling safe and belong to the team, part of the team and part of the outdoor school family. So yeah, without actually explicitly doing it, it's something we do and it's something we are aware of where they sit. And wherever they are in that, the aim is to get them to the next level of that, right? It's like if they are at, self-actualization, and brilliant, we've done our job perfectly, and you can sit there and we'll do a degree, we'll sit and do a physics degree with you, right? Hasn't happened yet, but I'm absolutely convinced it will. So yeah, it's there is always learning, even if you're at the top of the pyramid, there are always things to learn, and how do I stay here longer, right? That's a great goal, isn't it?
Yeah, I think so. So you just mentioned a minute ago about behaviour management, and you kind of grimaced as you said it.
I don't like the phrase.
No, it's a horrible phrase, isn't it? So within the context of kind of the regulation we've been talking about, can you tell me why kind of traditional behaviour policies often don't work in the sense that they might be punitive, but not actually effective in supporting a learner to kind of make positive changes?
Yeah, absolutely. It's funnily enough, we're rewriting behaviour policy at the moment. It's something we're really looking at. So, Adam and I have drafted a few copies of it up. But yeah, most alternative provision behaviour policies are based around mainstream behaviour policies.
Yes.
And we face different challenges. We have different learners with different needs, often very complex. So to be able to treat one learner the same here as we would in a mainstream setting, the context is really different. So you're absolutely right in using the word punitive. A lot of the behaviour policies at my last school, which was mainstream, and I'm not going to belittle them because it's a great school, but the behaviour policy starts off with, we're here to support our learners, and it's a culture of praise and reward, which is exactly what we're aiming to do, right? Yeah. And then they go on to list what will happen to them if it goes wrong, right? Rather than the support that they could receive. Now, does it go wrong here? Yes, of course it does. And actually, we've been having some interesting conversations as we've been writing policy. Is the punitive bit of it sometimes important for our SEN learners that see it as, oh, that's an indicator very clearly that what I have done is not helpful. Right? So yes, it would look like a punitive punishment to them, to everyone around them, perhaps, specifically other learners as well who've come from a mainstream setting who would also see it as that. But actually, it's a real good way of understanding that particular learner going, oh, okay, that's not okay, what just happened. How do we deal with it then? And the restorative approach is really critical with what we do. And that could be a restorative with peers, it could be restorative with staff. That should be weaved into what we do. Now, our behaviour policy at the moment has kind of developed into a kind of mishmash of policy and pedagogy. And it kind of suited where we were a little while ago as we were trying to find our identity. Now, I think here more than probably anywhere else I've ever been, we've got the opportunity to be really brave with our behaviour policy and go, actually, what is it we want to do? Do we just want to punish these kids? And there has to be an element of punitive response to that.
Yes, because apart from anything else, I was talking to an ex-Ofsted inspector, and she was saying, she said the thing about restorative justice policies, she was like, I understand them, she said, but there is a sense where the learners who might have been the ones that have been negatively affected by someone else's behaviour, if they see that person, like essentially in their eyes, has got away with it, they're kind of like, all right, hang on, so they were able to do this and nothing's happened to them. So it's a balance, isn't it?
And that's and staff would think like that as well, that come from mainstream back. I was having this conversation with the staff at Tiverton the other day. It's a really difficult,
really tricky
thing to deal with, even as an adult. Right? You go, well, I've just been hit by this learner, and I've got to see them tomorrow, and it's got to be a fresh start. That's hard, right? Because it's a really negative thing that's happened to you, and while we can understand the reasoning behind it, that behaviour is still really difficult to deal with. So there's a little element of rewilding that we have to do, and that's learning for staff and learners that look at, well, he's got away with that. Well, okay, let's unpick that. And has he got away with it? Well, getting away with it might mean different me
things,
to you to everyone here, when actually the response to that is that restorative approach. Okay, so this has happened, how do we make it okay? How do we make it better? So it is, and we've got staff coming in all the time, with a period of growth here, which is great. By and large, they've come from mainstream background. That's a really difficult mindset to get out of. And it took me a while as well, actually. It's a real difficult, hang on a minute, this has happened, this can't be right, us seemingly doing not much. But actually the plan around the learner and that particular behaviour could be quite intricate and nuanced. And yet it is quite difficult, and I have conversations with learners all the time when they say, well, nothing's happened, how dare you do that, that's not okay. If I did that, my mum and dad at home would do this. And it's like, well, I understand that. We have to be able to say to our learners, we're all different, we have to look at the context of what's going on. Right? It could be that something awful's gone on at home. That context of understanding of where that behaviour's come from is really important. Behaviour management. I know behaviour's in my lead. Actually, Behaviour Lead is my job title. And I'm not really keen on the word behaviour. I think in terms of education, at least, behaviour's become a very negative word. We don't go, oh, your behaviour's been brilliant this week. It's usually you get sent to the behaviour centre, or the behaviour policy is how to deal with negative behaviour, right? So it's a word that's been hijacked a little bit, and we don't manage behaviour. Our learners will act in the way that they act. We can try to mitigate it slightly with how we approach it, but our learners will still have moments where they act in a certain way. Our job is to respond effectively and in a helpful manner for them. That's not managing anybody's behaviour except your own, right? So actually, the response that staff and hopefully other learners that we can teach them, that is not. That would be our version of behaviour management. Conduct response. Conduct response would, I think, would be how I would like to word it.
Oh, well, you're going to hate me, Matt, because I'm going to use behaviour.
No, that's fine. I understand we have to use the word, right? I get it.
So in terms of, I don't envy you having to kind of work out what our approach as a school is to things. It must be, as you say, there's so many different factors and nuance, and I guess in an ideal world you would have like an individual behaviour policy, I'm using inverted commas for those who are listening, for every single learner, because it would be different, but obviously that's not really feasible with how many learners we've got,
112 I think is on roll at the moment. But we do have our individual behaviour support plans, our IBSPs, yet another acronym. We love them.
We do love acronyms.
We do love an acronym. So we do, each learner will have their own, and actually that will give us conduct response strategies based around that particular learner. But ultimately, that you're right, there are elements of our behaviour policy that have to be across the board, I think, because actually that's how society works, right? We don't exist in a bubble here. We are preparing these learners ultimately for a life outside of the outdoor school. Now, while what we do here is very, very different and extremely special, we still have to be able to mesh at the end of their journey with us into society, and there needs to be an understanding that if within society, if you do a certain thing will happen. And while we don't necessarily need to replicate it in school, and I'm thinking like if there was an assault or something, we don't need to replicate the response the police would have, for example. We need to be able to explain that outside of school, that would be the response. So, an element of what we would do as responding to conduct needs to be leading to how it would be done outside of school. And that's a really difficult line to tread.
That's really tricky.
And you're right, actually. That ideally you'd have a different response for every single learner. Like, we understand that this learner's in this particular place, therefore that conduct is completely explainable. Everyone around him or them understands it, and you go, okay, our response could be that. Now, ultimately, I'd like to get to the point where we don't exclude anybody from school. That would be my dream. While having said that, I understand that where we sit at the moment, there are certain actions and certain behaviours that we would need to plan more detail around the learner. And in order to do that, we might need a little bit of space to go, okay, let's all have a day. So it is a suspension. We can now plan around the learner for what, so we would then update their IBSP, risk assessment may be in place. So we do try and tailor it as best we can for that learner, but the behaviour policy we're hopefully finalising at the moment is quite short. And the reason it's quite short is because that should be the umbrella over everybody, and actually that there shouldn't be a lot of that. The rest of it should be all context for our learners underneath that umbrella, that's the decision making from the delivery staff from SLT on site. They know the context of these learners much better than the policy, so make the decision, providing it's in line with what the guidance and outlines of it. You make the choice, right? You know these learners, you know what will work best. You know how that will look to the rest of the group and even the rest of the site sometimes. So make those decisions based on the context of our learners. But there needs to be a framework, and it's based around keeping everybody safe, right? We have learners that will exhibit actions and conduct that's really unhelpful, but actually is just a bit annoying. Right? And it's like, okay, well let's deal with that. When it becomes unsafe, I think that's probably where policy should be able to step in and go, actually, these are the guidelines around this really unsafe behaviour.
Absolutely. And so when you're writing these kind of guidelines and policies, where does kind of the whole thought of supporting learners with their regulation kind of get incorporated into them? Like, is it kind of named within the policies that...
Historically, for mainstream policies in particular, as I said, most are based upon, but it's not even mentioned at all in a behaviour policy. And actually, it's not really mentioned in the policy we're putting together. It tends to be more in terms of our practice. Okay, so it's in terms of... We say very often when in the aftermath of an incident, for example, that a learner is dysregulated. Now, we can identify that after the event and we know that that's happened. Now, the difference between a dysregulation and a non-dysregulation, so a choice in that conduct, can be really difficult with our learners. So to have it as an explicit, this is what we do in terms of a dysregulation in terms of policy, can be really difficult, because it's very difficult to say that is absolutely a dysregulation, this is how we handle it. And again, our learners have different triggers, they have different coping strategies, you know. So to actually explicitly name it in policy is really quite difficult. So absolutely, you're right, Hannah, it's got to be robust within practice.
Yes.
And that comes within our price approach
and your CPD
and all our CPD and you know, actually in the IBSP and any risk assessments or, you know, anything around our learner profiles, all this stuff's got to be robust enough around the learner. The behaviour policy itself shouldn't really dictate pedagogy.
No.
While this isn't pedagogy per se, it is the pastoral approach within that within that framework.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Sorry, just to drop things on the floor. I think we've kind of pretty much covered most things I wanted to ask. I guess maybe I'd just ask for an example of what. So you were saying at the very beginning about how co-regulation is like kind of the first stage when you're a young child learning. How kind of let's start again. Do some learners still need to co-regulate? Like,
absolutely.
And what does that look like in reality? I guess that's what I'm curious about.
Yeah. Okay. So absolutely. Learners, I mean, adults still need co-regulation occasionally, right? And I know plenty of adults who do find regulating quite difficult. Absolutely. I mean, the co-regulation at a very young age can start with the sh sounds that a parent or carer would give to a baby, and that sh is a reassuring sound of what the baby would have experienced in the womb. It replicates the mother's heartbeat, which is why a shush is actually quite calming.
Oh my gosh, I didn't know that.
Well, there we are. That's the very first real co-regulation that you would do. So when you pick up a baby and you're trying to replicate the comforting sound of their mother's heartbeat.
That's so funny because my 11-year-old hurt himself really badly a couple of weeks ago, and I thought he might have broken his leg actually. And he's quite a tough nut, but he was like in floods of tears, and he doesn't usually let me hug him when he's hurt. He's usually like, leave me alone, like. But this time he kind of folded in, and I found myself just going shh. Yeah. And I was afterwards. I thought it's a weird thing to do to your 11-year-old, but maybe that's why.
Yeah, it's funny that my best friend's father unfortunately passed away recently, and I did exactly the same without realising it.
Yeah.
I kind of gave him a big hug.
Yeah.
And actually and just when it'll be out, and he broke down. He was clearly very upset. And you know, just a few words of comfort, and I actually shushed him. Yeah. And he actually, you know, and it's still a natural thing, and it's still a comfort, even as an adult. Now,
I mean, not magic, obviously scientific.
Yeah.
But just amazing.
But that is the first co-regulation we tend to learn as small infants, right? And actually, that can still be effective, as you found out. Yeah. So it may be that physical touch. Actually, a lot of our learners will crave that. Yeah. That deep, comforting touch. That, you know, it may be a hug, or it may be some kind of proprioception of deep contact. So there's lots of physical ways of that co-regulate. You know, even putting an arm around somebody, they're able to feel you. They're able to feel that you're there. That's a comfort. That's okay. They can see that you are calm, hopefully, and they kind of respond. So you kind of, there is an element of tuning into each other, which is really important. And I think as learners get older as well, that co-regulation of I'm now going to demonstrate and model how when I'm feeling a certain way, this is how I'm going to present, or how I might deal with it, and actually talking it through, narrating to the learner what will happen, all those kind of things, and all these strategies to help the learner regulate when they see you regulating with them. Even to the point of, I can see you cross. You know, thank you for showing me your cross, by the way. Yeah. I can see that you're cross because I think your face is flushed, and you're gripping your fists, and and you're breathing really heavily. Thank you for showing me that. Yeah. I'm a big fan of the word thank you, by the way. Yeah. I'm going to try and see if we can get everybody to start every single sentence to our learners with the words thank you. I want them to hear it hundreds of times a day. Anyway.
Is that because you feel that they don't hear it enough? Sorry.
Yeah. Oh, no, absolutely. Tangent. We love a tangent. Yeah, absolutely. I think having draft written the policy, and as I said earlier, most policies start off with a culture of praise and reward, and then go to punitive punishments. This praise and reward thing for me is massive. It should be our default setting, and by and large it is, but not actually nominated in anything. Now, this is kind of policy edging into pedagogy and practice a little bit, but I think this is important enough to mention, and whether it ends up in policy or not, I don't know. But that being able to go, I've got a learner coming at me who's really cross. Thank you for showing me how cross you are.
Yeah.
And then may call me some names, right? Yeah. And it'd be, thank you for trying to connect with me. I appreciate that. I might want to think about doing it slightly different next time, but thank you. I can appreciate you feel safe enough with me to speak like that. Thank you.
Yeah.
So they're really cross, really angry with me, and they've just heard thank you 5 times.
Yeah.
So they're going to go home having heard thank you 100 times, right? Almost regardless of circumstances. What does that feel like? Oh, thank you. I probably don't get that a lot. I probably get, don't do that, stop doing that. Yeah. What are you doing that for? As opposed to, I got told thank you 100 times today.
Yeah.
And then when at some point the learner comes in, sits down nice and calmly and starts having breakfast, thank you for that. That's incredible. That's really good. I appreciate you doing that. That's really nice. Look, everyone's now looking at you as that's brilliant. Thank you so much for setting an example. Oh, all of a sudden I'm setting an example.
Yes.
That praise and reward thing is absolutely critical to me. And and I had a conversation with Dan, our new head of school, funnily enough, on his interview day. I happened to be here about this exact thing.
Yeah.
And it's just a little bit mad to want to start every sentence with thank you, right? It's like, how do you do that? Now, I think you should start with hello if you haven't seen them that day already, right? But the next thing should be thank you. And it's a really simple little script thing that all our staff can learn.
Yeah.
Thank you. Right, now I've got to work out what I'm saying thank you for, right? That's a little bit of skill involved. But actually, just the hearing of that positive reinforcement for them, that even when things are going wrong, they're still doing things that are important, that require praise and reward. Yeah, massive. I love that. I think it could be a massive thing. That's going to be my big drum I'm going to start banging over the next year or so. So yeah.
Oh no, I love that. That's great. I think we have kind of come to the end of what I wanted to say, but is there anything else you wanted to say that you feel like that we've missed or something?
I'm exhausted, Hannah. I don't think I can speak anymore. No, I think we've covered it. What I will say is I think we're in a really unique position here that we can address this probably better than most schools. It's like we're an independent special school, right? So that gives us a certain amount of leeway to do the right thing, which is one of our pillars for the group, right?
Well done, yeah.
Do the right thing, and to me that's the most important one out of all of them. Do the right thing is critical, and doing the right thing may not be doing what's always been done, and we've got a real opportunity here that we can do that, and it can really fit our learners and suit our learners really well and prepare them for what's coming. And I'm really excited about working here. I love it. I absolutely adore being here because of that. Yeah. And we've got a real opportunity beyond probably any school in the country that we can really get this right and be that kind of gold standard. And we've been, with policy and practice, we've been working our way towards it, and we still will. It's still not going to be perfect, but to get to that real gold standard of what we can do for our project-based learning, metacognition, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and to provide an example for the schools is great.
Yeah, we haven't got it right by any stretch of the imagination. We haven't got it perfect, but we're absolutely heading in the right direction, and that excites me beyond belief. Yes. And it's such a great place to be.
Great enthusiasm, thanks, Matt. So finally, I ask everyone these 3 questions to finish up, and my first question, just to kind of bring us back down to a calmer level before we go: how do you relax?
Red wine? No, that's not it. Well, to be fair, if it's been a difficult week, a glass of red wine on a Friday night is very welcome. But I kill pixels with my friends. We on a Tuesday and Thursday, me and my 4 best mates, we game. I'm of that generation still, I'm afraid. I play cricket and rugby. I played cricket yesterday for Devon, actually, over 50s, which is quite nice. But so sport on a weekend and killing pixels in the evening and the occasional glass of red wine.
That sounds very balanced.
Yeah.
And what are you reading or listening to right now?
Oh, reading. I've just finished one of the best books I've ever read.
Oh, wow, okay.
And it was such a weird one. It was somebody, this is where social media can be brilliant, right? Somebody popped up in my algorithm and was talking about HS2, the train, right? And his name's Rory Sutherland.
Okay.
And he's actually a marketeer, an advertising executive, worked for Ogilvy's in London. He was the director at Ogilvy's. And he was talking about, and the book is called Alchemy. I wholeheartedly recommend it to anybody. It is fabulous. It's based around marketing and advertising, but it's about how there are certain answers to problems or solutions to problems that are alchemical rather than manufactured.
Yeah.
And he talks about HS2. Obviously, it's in the news at the moment. It's going to be £102 billion. And this was the bit that caught me. And he said, he said it's £102 billion. He said, to get the same out of it, right? It's a 20-minute decrease in time from London to Birmingham. He said that's an engineer's answer. And he said, what I would have done is I'd have spent £1 billion making sure the trains were as plush as possible. They all had perfect Wi-Fi. He said I'd have hired all the male and female supermodels in the world, and then I'd have had them wander up and down the train handing out glasses of Petrus, right? And I kind of went, well, yeah. And he said, and then you'd have passengers asking the trains to go slower. And I was like, he's right. He's absolutely right. The speed bit of it is an engineer's answer, but actually making the journey better isn't about getting there quicker.
No.
So that got me hooked. And this book is all about slightly different approaches to how you might, which is a little bit where I came up with the thank you thing. Right? It's a slightly different answer to a different problem. My favourite quote of the book is, the opposite of a good answer is a good answer. And I kind of like went, oh, that's a great, and it is, because you automatically think, well, it's the opposite of a good answer. So the good answer to HS2 is 20 minutes quicker. That's the good answer. And the opposite is, no, make it slower, but make the journey nicer. That's still a good idea, right? So, fabulous, really fabulous book.
Sounds interesting.
And listening, and I'm about to start Terry Pratchett's Discworld series again for about the 10th time, which is just absolutely fabulous. It's my absolute go-to. But I've just started listening properly to the Smashing Pumpkins, which for some reason I missed in the 90s, which is right in my wheelhouse. And I like Pearl Jam and all that kind of stuff, but missed the Smashing Pumpkins for some reason. So just started listening to them again, which is great. My son has actually started listening to it on Alexa in his room as well. I occasionally go into his room and shout, Alexa, play Chirpy Chirpy Cheep Cheep, or just pick a random song, and he's getting really annoyed now. I keep picking novelty songs for him to listen to when he's on the phone to his friends. So he's had Mr. Blobby and the Wombles and all sorts of stuff there as well. So Smashing Pumpkins, getting back into those.
Yeah, they are great. And finally, why is being outdoors important to you?
We evolved there, right? It's what we're evolved to be part of. We're designed to be outdoors. There's a sense of calm and peace you can only find outdoors. There were Martin, who does some of the forest school training for the group. I did the first aid, and he does a little bit where he says just go sit in a forest for 15 minutes, completely still. You
do the sit spots,
sit spots, and see what happens. And I've never done that, and I did it that weekend, and it's phenomenal. Just to be able, you just focus in on birds will arrive because they realise that you're still and calm. Yeah. And it's such an important connection that we have to what's around us, right? Yeah. So we're very lucky here in South Devon as well to have such a variety of landscapes and outdoors. Yeah. We've got the moors 2 minutes that way, and the sea 2 minutes that way. And
we are so lucky.
We are so lucky. It's a fabulous place to be. But it's great.
Excellent. Thanks so much for your time today, Matt. I really appreciate it.
Hannah, thank you very much indeed. It
really enjoyed it.
Thoroughly enjoyable.
A massive thank you to Matt for joining me to talk about why regulation should be at the heart of education. I found that a really interesting conversation. I hope that you did too. As always, if you did enjoy the podcast, please do rate it, subscribe to it, share it with your friends, do all the things that mean that more people will find us. We'll be back in a fortnight with another episode, but until then, thanks for listening.